So we're still in our lockdown series because we're still in lockdown. And if you've been reading the news like me this week, it hasn't been too good. It looks like we're in lockdown till April or May. If you have kids at home like us, then hopefully schools will go back before then, and that'll give us a bit of a change. But the level 5 is going to stay with us for a while yet. So my question this morning is, what are we going to do till then? If it's another 2 months, how are we going to wait? How are we going to last and survive? And I want to give us a few postures for waiting under lockdown, a few ways for us to wait that come from Paul in this passage that was so beautifully read for us. And the first is to groan. To groan, a posture of groaning. Now, you don't really need me to tell you to groan because it's happening. That's what the passage is saying. It's saying that we all groan, that creation groans, and that we, even followers of Jesus, Christians, are groaning too. Groaning is just part of our state. It's already happening. You don't need permission from me. The word is to groan or to sigh or to grumble. When it talks of creation grumbling, it's because of frustration. This sense that creation wasn't made for this. There should be more to life for creation itself. And in that frustration, it is grumbling. And we too are grumbling. That is just part of life, but it's also part of faith as well. We grumble too because in this hope we are saved. That yes, we are saved, but we're not exempt for grumbling because our salvation always has this future element to it. There's always something that we are hoping for and longing for as Christians. Even from whenever we made a decision to be a Christian and to follow Jesus, not everything comes in its fullness then. There's always a future part, always a hope part. And that means that in the here and now, there is groaning as well as hope. That waiting has both sides of that coin. So what do we do with our groaning? How do we groan? As the passage flows on, Paul talks about this sort of need to pray. We need to pray, but actually we can't. We do not know what we ought to pray for. So we want to, in some way, bring what we have to God, but we struggle with it. And so he talks of how the Spirit helps us in our weakness, in our inability to pray, and helps us to pray. So, just 1 second, sorry. Sorry, slight distraction in the room. So the Spirit helps us in our weakness. He helps us as we pray. Now, the intriguing bit here is that as the Spirit helps us in our weakness and helps us to pray, the Spirit himself groans too. So actually the Spirit of God in some way legitimizes our groans because God's Spirit himself groans with us. The word groan appears 3 times in this passage. There's this flow from creation itself groaning, the whole world, every object within that world groaning, to people, to Christians groaning, and now to God himself, who's come down into our world, sharing with us, who knows what it's like to live in this world, groaning with us. Our groans are legitimized by the Spirit. And then what the Spirit does is that actually these groans are brought to God. The Spirit's groans go to God. And I wonder if we should then bring our groans to God as well. Now, this passage doesn't say lament or use the word lament, but I don't need to hang the practice of laments on Romans chapter 8 because it is an age-old tradition that flows from all of the scriptures. 1/3 of the Psalms are laments. There's a whole book in the scriptures, the book of Lamentations, which is laments. Jesus himself lamented using many of those psalms in his life and ministry. And I wonder, how are we lamenting at this time? The groans that are being talked about here, I don't think are laments. Creation itself is groaning. So it certainly would be a different type of lament. But what we have is the ability to turn our groans into laments. Whatever frustrations that you have, and if you're like me, you have many at this stage, we can turn them into lament. So I want to Just leave that as a challenge, as a posture for you in this time. And the importance of it is that if you are groaning and you don't bring it to God and lament, then what else happens to it? What does it become? Because one option is we do nothing. We're feeling this frustration, this dissatisfaction, but we do nothing with it. That ain't good for us. Because we know that if we've anger and we don't voice it, that leads to bitterness, that the anger doesn't go away, it stays within us. And it seeps down into our beings, into our hearts, and becomes bitterness of some sort. Disappointment, if we don't voice it, doesn't go away either. And that will lead to cynicism within us. You know, if things haven't worked out, your disappointment, then maybe you begin to lower your expectations. You don't think that things can change. You think that maybe God doesn't answer prayer, and we become cynical. Either of those things are not good. So we don't do nothing. But don't just groan or grumble. I'm not saying those things are wrong. Paul doesn't say that here. But when we lament, we take those things that we feel and we bring them to God. There's a conscious turning to God with our feelings in lament, not just a venting. Although some of the Psalms you can just vent before him, but it's before him is the point. So I encourage you to do that, to bring what you feel before God. Don't just groan and don't just do nothing. So actually I want us to pause here. I said to get a piece of paper. Go get a piece of paper now if you haven't got one already. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes or 3 minutes to think about lamenting. Just going to put a slide up. We're going to do a little practice here. This is from Psalm 13. Hopefully you can see it now. And I've just taken Psalm 13 and I've kept the structure of the Psalm, but I've deleted some of the lines for you to write your own Psalm. So on the piece of paper that you have, and I encourage everyone to do this, even if you don't have a piece of paper with you, go get one. I'll email this out. We're just going to take 2 or 3 minutes now. I want you to do this later. But actually the concentration to sit, reflect, write. What is in my head? What is in my heart? Those frustrations. And bring them to God. But a structure of Psalm 13 here enables us to have that turn at the end of the Psalm as we trust to God. So let me be still for 2 minutes and let you do that. Okay, that's just a few 90 seconds, 2 minutes as a taster. I can see some of you writing, I can see some of you not writing. So let me be direct. I really encourage you to do this. Okay? And as a written prayer, writing forces you to reflect and say, what do I actually feel? And then take that prayer and voice it to God. Read it out if you want, ad lib from it. But do bring those groans to Him. Don't live this waiting season apart from Him. So I encourage you to do that. Well, we'll email that out and actually put 15 minutes aside this week and do it. If you're not a writing person, that's okay. Go for a prayer walk, voice it all. But remember that turn at the end of Psalm 13, where you turn in trust to God. Okay, so that's the first posture, to grow. The second is to wait eagerly. I love this. You can see this movement throughout the whole passage, from verse 18 all the way through. Verse 18, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing. They're not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. What Paul is saying is that it's going to be better. It is going to be better. The future will be better. And I think we need to hear this. And I think we need to hear it because what I feel at times and what I'm waiting for is actually a return to normality. That's what I think that's most of what we hope for in this COVID world or this lockdown world. We want to go back to normal. That suffering will end. But Paul's hope here is so much better. He is talking about a hope, a glory that's not worth comparing with the sufferings that we're going through at the moment. He has this positive picture of the future. Not just an end to the struggles, an end to lockdown, an end to suffering. He has this positive picture, this glory. And when he sees that glory, then the sufferings are not worth comparing. So my second challenge and the practice for us, the posture, is don't just wait for normality to come back. Wait for glory. That's what Paul urges us. Wait for glory, not just normality. And you see this movement throughout the passage. These 20 verses that were read so well for us are this movement towards hope, this movement towards something better. The creation, which is groaning and frustrated, moves towards liberation, moves towards freedom and glory. And human beings, those, including those who follow Jesus, are groaning inwardly. We have our struggles. But yet we are moving towards this full adoption as God's sons. The fullness of being in God's family, the redemption of our bodies, this physical impact on us as well. And being like Jesus, conformed to the image of his Son. It moves towards this amazing vision of hope. And what I sense as I read it, and I was reading it this week again and again, and I could pick up something within it, this sense of excitement that Paul has. That's maybe not just contained in any one verse or phrase, but that is there for him as he's trying to get it across. Paul longs for this. And I think that will come across to the early church reading it. He has this longing for it. Brought me back to thinking of Christmas Day. Thinking of that morning, it tends to be a late night in our house, ensuring everything's ready. And then at about 3 o'clock, someone comes in and is like, is it morning time? And we're like, no, it's not morning time. Go back to bed. And then around 4 o'clock, maybe not bang on the hour, but that sort of hour later, in again. Is it morning time? We're like, no, it's not morning time. Look outside. It is pitch dark. You can't see a thing. It is not morning time. 5 o'clock, back in again. Is it? No, we can't go downstairs yet. And then at 6, when we're sort of back in, we're like, okay, we'll go down now. We'll go back down at 6. But there's such excitement. What they are waiting for and longing for has captured their hearts. It's in their minds to the extent that they can't even sleep. In the weeks before Christmas, they're talking about it, all the parts of Christmas and what they're expecting and waiting for. It has captured them. And I sense that Paul in this passage has been captured by this vision of the future. Because he says that even though we groan inwardly, we wait eagerly. It's an eager waiting. We wait eagerly for this glory. Sometimes I wonder, or do whole days go by where we don't even think about the glory that's awaiting us? But Paul talks of waiting eagerly. Creation waits in eager expectation. There is this eagerness to what we wait for. Richard Bauckham is a scholar, biblical scholar, and he says this: to be a Christian is to live as a person for whom God's future shapes the present. And I love that. God's future shapes the present. Not just that it informs the present or is part of the present, it shapes us. Is that quote true of us? That it actually shapes our present? Because shapes is more than just believing it. It's informing and changing our desires and our longing. And when we have those longings and desires changed, then we wait eagerly. Then we are in eager expectation. See, Paul has such a vision of the future. He's been captured by it, that he sort of looks past the present sufferings, that they pale into insignificance for him. In Philippians, he talks about this choice he faces between the present and the future, and that actually he longs to depart. I desire to depart, to be with Jesus, because he's been captured by this future picture of glory. So do you wait eagerly? Do we wait eagerly for glory? And let me ask a question what excites you about our future? What excites you about our future? Because I want us to be people who don't just wait for the lockdown to end. Don't wait for normality. Wait for glory. Because that will give great hope in these days. So this coming week, as you finish your lament, finish writing your lament, that maybe you will pray daily, I want you to pause and think, what excites me about the future that awaits me in Jesus? Lastly, and quite shortly here, I will give a third posture. We turn our groans into laments. We wait eagerly, but it also says to wait patiently. Verse 25. We wait for it patiently. And this coexists with waiting eagerly and waiting patiently. That word patient is this sense that actually there's an endurance here. There's a perseverance involved. And I know that's the last thing you want to hear when you're locked down. Just persevere, just keep going. But as that flows into the rest of the passage, we see the reason that Paul is able to wait patiently, and he longs for the Romans to be able to wait patiently. We wait for it patiently because these whole next 14 verses tell us that this is a sure and certain hope. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. One of my spiritual heroes, and I know some of you share this with me, is a man called Jurgen Klopp. He's the manager of Liverpool Football Club. And a great man in many ways. His mother passed away in the last week, and her funeral was on Tuesday. Elizabeth Klopp, she was 81. Jurgen did not get to travel to her funeral because of COVID. And when interviewed by a German newspaper, he said this: "She meant everything to me. She was a real mum in the best sense of the word." And then he went on to say, as a devout Christian, I don't know how many celebrities would ever, I don't know when the last time I've heard that phrase in a newspaper from a celebrity. As a devout Christian, I know she's in a better place now. This sure and certain hope. He knows she's in a better place. He's able to wait patiently in his grief for this glory, this future, because it's sure and certain. And as it goes on in this beautiful passage, it is certain because it depends on Jesus, not on us. It does not depend on us, it depends on Jesus. And that's why we can be sure and certain. God has already given us Christ, verse 32. He did not spare his own son. God's already called us, verse 33, a call effected in Christ. And this Jesus in verse 34 has risen from the dead and is now interceding to the Father for us. He's speaking to God the Father, saying, those down there in Dublin West, I know them. I have died for them. They're with me. It is sure and it is certain. So I want to encourage us to maybe, we've talked of practical things, of taking walks and getting outside and keeping community going in lockdown. But on these spiritual disciplines, I want to give you 3 postures. And I really encourage you to act on them this week. Turn your groans into laments. Actually write out that lament and make it your prayer. And then think, how can you wait eagerly? What excites me about glory? And wait for it patiently. Reflect on what Jesus has done and the certainty of our hope. Thank you.